us through the day, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. So in this session, we are going to be talking about reimagining West African integration, right? So we've heard about the trends. From the previous session, attention was on the sorts of trends over the next 50 years. So drawing a map for us about the things we should perhaps turn our attention to, the things we should be focusing on as we think about the future of ECOWAS at this important juncture where we are celebrating its 50th anniversary. So what we are going to focus on from that platform is to take the conversation forward to reimagining, right? What might this new structure actually look like? Professor Tadesse had argued before that we need to ask whether regional organizations or frameworks are fit for purpose. Right? So reframing might be from a range of perspectives. We need to be able to reimagine so that we can rebuild and reconstruct. So it's really critical for us to go through with this exercise. Now, as part of the conversation this afternoon, we want to pay attention to a few key themes. The first theme, and I think is really critical, is to reflect on which principles should guide us in this exercise of reimagining, an ECOWAS of the future. From this moment, if we think from the future, what sorts of principles should guide us in this activity? A second point is to rethink, and I think we heard quite a bit of that through the debate and the conversations earlier. What is the logic of integration that should guide us in this endeavor? So how might we need to reconceptualize what successful regional integration looks like, sounds like, feels from the perspective of a broad base of West Africans? And that brings us very neatly to the third point we want to touch on today. And that is, what do we actually know of the West African citizens' logic of integration? How do West African citizens think of integration? Again, earlier today we saw some dissonance between how West Africans are moving across their region, despite challenges in doing so, and also in some cases actually ignoring the infrastructure that is supposed to be guiding them in doing so. Because as citizens of the region, we have always moved. We had some historical reflections around that. We've always moved in the region. And so defining this on a narrow basis might be a challenge. So let's think about how a broader base of West Africans are reflecting on this and how that needs to be aligned to a future integration agenda. And the final but very pertinent point that we want to touch on is which priorities should shape a new approach. I really appreciated Professor Tadesse's reflection that in some regard, we need to come away from an Uber Eats approach to this. We can't have a long wish list, at least that was his suggestion. Or we can have a long wish list, but how do we prioritize, right, to be able to move forward with something that is achievable? So how the afternoon will be structured is that we will hear from Dr. Faisal Garba Mohammed, and he'll give us a talk of about 7 minutes or so. And then we'll move into a discussion where we get some responses from Ms. Fatou Sengore Jane and from Dr. Fatima Akilu as well, from their own perspectives and vantage points in response to the talk we hear from Dr. Mohammed. After an initial conversation here on the panel, I will come back to you to hear from you on this really pertinent issue. So please note down your points, note down your questions, and I promise we will be back to also engage with that. So without further ado, please, Faisal, if you could take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Greetings, everyone, once again. Just to say that I have taken off my debater hat, so I am not bound by the positions I took earlier. Social structure of the region, and highlight some key issues around power and its distribution, and what the opposite would look like, building from communities upwards. So today's West Africa is confronted with key existential challenges like food, water, energy, and unemployment. A new regionalism of the people will have to grapple with how to enhance the capabilities of the citizens of the region in dealing with these and other challenges. If we take the question of energy that confronts the sub-region, how do we scale up the West African gas pipeline side by side with renewables in a way that is people-centered? What does such a conversation mean for communities that are routinely left out and whose lands are taken in mega projects? This brings center stage the logic of the surplus population that structures state and regional initiatives in the region. For whenever things like the West Africa gas pipelines are planned, the communities that are on the front lines of such initiatives are treated as the collateral of development. Aside the traditional actors, for example, who drive many of these initiatives, like the US, the EU, and lately China, but of course, new entrants like Turkey, the Gulf states, and Israel, internal competition within ECOWAS has been deepened by the hand of these multilateral actors that deepen the reality of enclave economies in the region. So if the degree of enclavism in the structure of West African economies that combine local, regional, and global capitalist interests, if there is a degree of enclavism in the structure of West African economies that combine local, regional, and global capitalist interests, then there's an aspect of enclavism that breaks up territories, and especially those territories that sit at the frontier of our broad political economy in the sub-region. So let me illustrate this. If you have a gas pipeline, that also means people are likely to be cleared of their land. In the process, the commons that people originally had access to get closed off. Accordingly, there's the need for principles that assess the common management of the commons. The reassertion of the commons not just as a basis for viable and sustainable economic activity and development, but as the basis of political self-management, as the basis on which different communities with different resources can network on the basis of their complementarity. So the commons, therefore, cut across different aspects outside of the economy. The commons also extend, of course, to public goods like water, land, and the notion of common ownership, which therefore encompasses working classes and the urban poor. But the commons also allude to notions of coordination at the most central level and the diffusion to local levels, but also struggles over localized common can generate systemic regional effects. For example, let's cite the recent example of what happened in Madagascar. So students were railing against water shortage and erratic electricity supply, teamed up with workers who were raising questions about the structure of the polity. Their target initially, of course, was water and electricity companies, but before long, they came to realize that the water and electricity companies that they thought were public in nature, in actuality, they were actually partially privatized. So in name, they were common, but in actuality, they were private, because you have markets that cartels have created whereby the commons become sites of accumulation. This carving out of sectors of the public utilities for private.
Madam Chair, can the gentleman slow down the reading of the text? The interpreters do not have the text. Madam Chair, can the gentleman slow down so that we are able to interpret it? Thank you, ma'am.
Become more and more commercialized with very little investment and no new technology. The only way to generate return, therefore, is by squeezing workers and the public who get higher tariffs over time. So the notion of the commons, of course, does not automatically solve the entrenched issue of the ethic of management and performance in the public sector and the view of the public sector as a site of accumulation. But how then do we build?
Madam Chair, the interpreters would want the gentleman to slow down his reading so that we are able to interpret. Thank you very much, ma'am.
If we go back to the issue of access to basic necessities, it could mean central infrastructure to support local provisioning, whether it be through cross-subsidy or lending out engineering capacity for things like selected borehole harvesting. If the idea of the commons is both agency building, then it is also democratizing in a deeper and more fundamental way away from the liberal democracy that many youth on the continent are railing against. The idea of the common is institution building in the sense that collective institutions of decision-making are built in a way that different nodes of political authority emerge. The commons cannot simply address the local and the existing. It has to provide the alternative forms of innovation in the same way that clusters and internal privatization are innovations for capital that facilitate financial extraction and deepen inequality. The other value of the commons is redistributive. As we know, outside of the Gulf, Africa is the most unequal region in the world, and West Africa is particularly unequal. Now, this inequality is built on clusters of differential access to rights. So therefore, equalizing an equal playing field becomes important, but at the same time, it also means elevating the social relations of communities. Communities which have differential rights, as I said earlier on, but twinning that with transformation in a very fundamental sense. Communities across the region, even the most rural ones, are differentiated along gender, ethnic, and other cleavages of social differentiation. So for example, affirmative action targeted at women, minorities, ethno-national religious minorities becomes very crucial. This is because the region is saddled with a colonial legacy where land relations and natural resources are constructed, and land relations and social relations of production are constructed along entrenched hierarchies of differential rights. Community ownership should mean everyone in the community, residents, commitment, and become the criteria for access. It cannot be about ancestry when someone came to settle a place, indigeneity, settler, citizen, and foreigner. Now, the foregoing require very conscious mobilization of human, financial, and intellectual resources. And I think if we take public financing as a key anchor, this means having innovations that take seriously what do we do with things like pension funds. Because as we speak, pension funds are already being used by purpose for private capital accumulation. Another template is the use of common assets where land is pooled for village level and town level enterprises across borders, not in a fragmented sectional way, but on an inclusive basis. This takes seriously the material dimension of what the philosopher Kwesi Wiredu calls deliberative democracy. This calls for moving away from catch-up development to human flourishing as the main knob of development and social transformation. The question of leadership is central to this, especially the allocation of resources at the local level. Neoliberalism has corrupted the leeway in traditional social organization, so no small number of chiefs across the sub-region are involved in very destructive mining, which fuses together equity funds and the new vehicles through which capitalism is expanding its frontiers in the region. So because of the need for natural resource transfer, chiefs have become active in the creation of shares and private equities and all kinds of bonds using ordinarily common land, but in this case, purposing it for their own economic advancement. It is therefore impossible to think of meaningful democracy of citizens that leads to integration when some are subjects with differential rights on a sliding scale of claims. A thoroughgoing social equalization and social equality is therefore necessary. It does not mean that one does not own land because you are from country A or country B. No, it is that you only have access to resources on the basis of residency and historical association, not some ethnic affiliation that excludes others. In this project, national ownership, which is discredited by neoliberalism, has to be viewed as legitimate and necessary. In the context of great inequality, we need public coordinating institutions that can be reduced to market competition and what the market wants. On the basis of this, both regionalism and engagement with multilateral actors has to be anchored on redistribution. The normal functioning of open regionalism, and I hope we'll come to talk about that during the discussion, produces inequality by the very constitution of its making. It is unequal in the way it's functioning, both in its political economy and its political ecology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Faisal. Really fascinating submission there. I'd give a very brief overview as I come to the panelists to respond. But hearing from Faisal there about how reimagining, and thank you, this was an actual proper reimagination of how regionalization could be reconstructed to think through the coming period. And we heard there the centrality of power and distribution, right? That has to be placed at the heart of the conversation. And in doing so, a big focus on a commons approach to this. So really breaking with what dominant approaches have been, and we heard some reference to that, sort of coming away from the idea that development is a competition and that we have to constantly be in a race to catch up with others around the world, but to really think about interior African worlds, to think about African spaces as the center, to recalibrate the needs of Africans as the starting point, not an external means of measure. And as part of that, such an exercise would mean we don't think about economics in isolation. We think about economic factors alongside social factors, alongside political factors, recognizing that they impinge and impact on one another in very extensive ways. Another point was made in this exercise, how we rethink education and knowledge exchange as well becomes really, really critical in a way that is innovative. It's not purely in the classroom, how we think about the place of leadership, about negotiation, and also about technology exchange in a way that is more equitable. And then that leads us to another really critical point, and I dare say a big factor in some of the challenges with regionalization as it has been constructed to date, and that is a redistributive aspect, not as an add-on, but as a central organizing principle. This conversation must think about disaggregated groups, and Faisal mentioned a good number of those, and think about how we prioritize those groups to ensure we come to a place where we are giving them access to similar levels of rights, or actually that should be the claim they have in these situations. We heard also about finance. How do we navigate with, forms of international finance subordination? We know that a lot of the holders of finance exist from outside the continent, but how can we seek to deploy those tools to resource this sort of commons-based approach? And finally, a conversation about deliberative development and how we have to think about development as being very human-centered, really challenging us to shift the debate or see this as an opportunity to shift the debate. Now, some of the questions that we are poised to contemplate here are around. We've heard here from Faisal about some key organizing principles. What key organizing principles will determine a successful regional integration? And there's some proposals here from Faisal. I wondered if I could come first of all to Fatou, to see, to your mind, from what Faisal has said, and, of course, from your own extensive knowledge, are there some principles that Faisal has mentioned that resonate with you as being important as we think about ECOWAS going forward? Or are there additional principles that you think we need to be thinking about in this next phase?
Thank you very much, moderator. I would like also to thank the organizers for really conveying this timely dialogue. Looking at what has been said here, and also I think our lived experience over the past few years with I'll call it the decline of ECOWAS, sometimes I ask myself, are we witnessing the end of the golden era of ECOWAS? Looking at what happened in the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, I think those are the last really impactful intervention. But when I looked at those also, I think we are still in unfinished business. Unfinished business in the sense that there's a disconnect between the macro intervention and what citizens are feeling. When you look at data research, people are telling us, yes, ECOWAS is still that macro catering for the leaders. Like the case in point, the Gambia, ECOWAS did a wonderful, but dropped the ball somehow. Of course, intervention is there, support to maintain peace and security, but are we listening to the voices? I'll leave that for another conversation, but I think when you see what is happening in the Gambia, I think we realize that we do the heavy lifting, but we don't complete the job. And we can see it in many other parts of the region. The other one, who's, you know, with whom are we going to do this transformation? You know, the seniors in the region, I think we are in an ECOWAS premise, so we don't name. But those, you know, we look up to, those we thought at some stage would really lead us, you know, to brighter future, consolidating democracy, ensuring that, you know, all those important framework built, you know, through citizens, you know, like public resources, efforts, you know, those leaders entrusted with, you know, our aspirations, the dreams, will really take us through this journey in a peaceful, and also we thought at some stage also that those leaders, they understood the stakes in the world. We all know what is happening in the world with the crisis in multilateralism, with transactional, you know, way of doing things, Africa really being a kind of a target. We are really unsafe because we have more resources than ever. Most of these countries now are discovering oil and gas across the region. A lot of countries have discovered new minerals, but still citizens do not feel. And what resonates in his deliberation is the social contract. And it has been said many times, Dr. I think BC mentioned it a lot. I think for citizens, what they need to see, you know, concrete deliverables, making sure that when the hospitals are functioning, the schools, the public schools are functioning, you know, we have security. And I think these are the things that are key ingredients for us really to maintain the sustainable development. There's also another point that I want to raise. Of course, it has been said again by Professor Mbao and the previous speakers. When you look at ECOWAS, I think women's rights, participation, and even the issues around youth are afterthoughts. I think if we are reimagining, I cannot say it better than them, but if we are reimagining, we need to bring those voices. The work of civil society across during dictatorship, what diaspora has done, Nigerian diaspora, who inspired us a lot, we the Gambians, and who mentored most of us, you know, during those difficult times, and the human rights movement in general. I think those are lost in the conversations. And I think we need to build ECOWAS with all the voices, not, you know, with only leaders. The last point, I know we are going to elaborate a lot on that, but about the legitimacy issues around image. Perception do matter. And the way ECOWAS is portrayed, and we don't see responses, adequate responses to enlighten citizens, to enlighten the world what ECOWAS is doing. We take it for granted, you know, the free movement. Obviously, when we say you can travel in all this, of course, beyond massaging our egos, I think it's an achievement for us. It's an important thing that we can say that, you know, over the years, the founding fathers and mothers have worked hard to enable us to move around and to consolidate the project of integration. But then what? Women are suffering in our borders. We don't have a clear, despite institutions that are there, we don't have clear policies, regional policies implemented on agriculture. And today, women are, you know, facing most of the challenge in terms of land redistribution, in terms of, and I think one point I want to emphasize, he mentioned it, the land grabbing. And I think it's a, you know, time-ticking bomb. We are not looking into it, but it's important also to look. The last point is about the digital. Somebody mentioned it. And the narrative. We have to take care of the narrative. We have to take care of how to govern. I think most of our countries are trying to regulate the flow of information. We are moving far with technology. And if you look at those tech giants, their turnover is more than, you know, our GDPs combined. So we cannot, and also they are back with their countries. So we cannot regulate them. What needs to happen is to have investments that will help us really to govern the sector in a way that will help citizens really to be protected, our data to be safe, because we also are selling companies selling data across the region without any regulation, and that is also a fundamental challenge going forward. So these issues around disinformation is not trivial. It's important for peace and security. It's important for development, because if we don't manage that, lastly, I think we're going to have serious problems, especially with the young people going forward. So we need also to look into. But overall, I think the issue is about social contract, issues around legitimacy, but also the leadership in terms of implementing the norms, the framework that has been set. In many quarters, we hear more and more, are we going to lower the standards because some left? I think this is a question that I feel is dangerous. How can we bring them together? How can we work for more implementation? I think that should be the answer, instead of saying, okay, maybe we should review and see if we can lower our standards. I think that could be also another challenge for human rights, for governance, and for the future of democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for that. Perhaps I can come to Dr. Fatima now and ask a little bit about this question of whose integration. And I think we heard a mention of that just now. Who are we building this transformation with, right? Who are the co-travelers here? So from you, given your extensive work on health, peace and security in the Sahel region, from that vantage point, how do you think the logic of integration from the perspective of West African citizens, those that you work with, how do you think that perspective could be aligned with an agenda for regional integration, a future-focused agenda for regional integration?
Thank you so much for that question. I think let me just start by first looking at the regional bodies that we have on the continent. They all started with hope, imagination, the idea of integrating not just the region, but maybe also the continent. But we have to remember that in the case of ECOWAS, it's 50 years old. It's actually middle-aged. So middle age is a time that could be for rejuvenation or for more inward-looking stagnation. So we're at a crossroads where they have to choose which one it's going to be. They are all the things that we're talking about, it's happening at different levels. So on the ground, citizens are integrating in so many ways, and I'll give you examples. If you look at the young citizens of our continent, they're integrating through music, through art, through literature, through technology. They are creating and claiming an identity for themselves that is African. There's lots of things that are happening. For example, young African girls are rejecting simple things like perming their hair. They're proud to show their Africanness. So they are in many ways leading, but so when you look at it, Africa is a young, old continent. It's a young continent of people, an old continent of leaders. So where does that leave us? Now, a lot of the innovation in terms of who we are and where we should be are coming from the young, even in the narratives of values. We are still, the older generation, the institutions, we're still wrapped up in so-called Western values. I mean, they've managed to corner values that are universal and telling us that they're Western, and we are copying it without thinking. But young people are now saying, what does it mean to be African? And who are we? And we're not listening to the extent that we should be listening. Integration happens in community. It doesn't happen at the top. And when you go, there's different levels of communities, and I just want to take a minute to talk about the most marginalized communities where they are left on their own to integrate. They're integrating through trade, through kinship. But what do? We put barriers because we're afraid. Our borders have become so securitized, literally. We talk about free movement, but what does it mean? Free movement of what? Is it on the one hand, we encourage open borders. When we think about borders, we're thinking about land borders mostly. But look at the other borders that are governments are pushing for them to become more and more open. Our air borders. Now you can travel to Nigeria with visa on arrival. And also many countries in Africa, yet people cannot travel by land across the continent. So these are some of the poorest or the least resourced. So there's a massive imbalance in the way that we think about equity in the integration process. I think he talked about leadership. I just want to say one or two things about leadership. I think when you go to communities, you find, I think, what true leadership should be. That is where you find integrity, a sense of justice, sense of fairness, equity. A lot of times you don't find it at the top where they're thinking about political balancing and how resources should be distributed. And I think we can really learn from there, and we don't always have to take the traditional pathways to leadership and think that we can only learn from top-down leadership. Again, the issue of education. What exactly is education in today's world? I don't even know. It's ever changing, ever evolving. And is it this one track that we've been conditioned to follow? And is it still fit for purpose? And I think those are things that we have to interrogate and not look at, keep looking through the prism of top or bottom down. People who have traditional Western-centered education rise to the top. People who haven't had that are classified as uneducated. What exactly does education mean? Because they have skills, they have knowledge that we can learn from. So there's so many imbalances that perhaps are holding us back psychologically from truly integrating on the continent. And I'd like to finish by one example that I think you might find a bit odd in this discussion, but I'm just looking at the new industries that are growing across this continent. One of them is the wedding industry. This is a massive, massive billion naira or whatever dollar industry, and it has different levels of skill. But it's now been exported across the continent, across the region. People are coming to do Nigerian weddings. People are using Nigerian tailors, Nigerian headgears, gillies, and we're also copying from other continents. So I think we are blending and integrating our culture in ways that are happening from the bottom up. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for those very rich comments as well. I'll come to the floor shortly, but I wondered if I could pose really what I think will be a final question to panel members before we open for further conversation, and perhaps I'll begin with you since you started us off today. So we've heard a lot from the panel. You shared a lot yourself, and if we're to take what was said earlier about we will need to set some priorities as we think of that coming period, and as we think of reimagining, there are many, many things we could do. But if we think from where we are today, and we think of building a system that will endure. So we're sorry, but we talk about being sorry, a little bit sorry about where some things are with ECOWAS today, but it is still here, right? It is still here. What must we prioritize if we want to see a thriving regional framework that will be delivering on a lot of what we've said today? If I can begin with you and I come back to the rest of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So perhaps I will begin with the youth question again,
Yeah.
right? So we've gone through this phase of what many people call jobless growth, right, in the sub-region, and very short-term investments, the financialization of the economy, the hollowing out of the real economy. So I think really is about livelihood, the capacity for us to reproduce ourselves as human beings. And therefore, this means going back to some earlier attempts at creating forward and backward linkages. So let me give you one example. So there was this attempt to create a regional cement industry which has linkage to not just raw material, but paper production, research and development around Simao or Simtogo. Now, that experiment was discarded with the emergence of open regionalism, right? Which is this idea of creating a market where multinationals will simply kind of find one joint place to act. So I think the first thing really is to take seriously the question of structural transformation, structurally transforming the structure of our economies and therefore the structure of our societies, right? So this question of the gender question is largely also the question of access to resources, right? The saddling of women with social reproduction is because you have very little to go around the cake, and so gender ideas of get mobilized for these kinds of purposes. And finally, I think we have the template in terms of what is happening on the continent, in the region, but of course on the continent. So during COVID, myself and some colleagues looked at the sub-region in terms of what is happening to ordinary working class and poor households in the context where you have very little to no social welfare, no social protection. And then what we realized was that it was the activity of cross-border women that kept many households going around those times. And these people have cooperatives and other structures of pooling resources together that could actually be upskilled if there is democratic legitimacy that our states have. So I think the key thing is if we prioritize the question of social transformation, but not just as a technicist question, but as a question of genuine democratic participation, and then taking that up could be for me the priority for now, because at the moment, because of the lack of legitimacy, then this, for want of a better word, this demagogues that we really see that are promising heaven in khaki. And I know this is a very unpopular kind of thing to say with people of my generation, that somehow military regimes are going to deliver on something. But it is appealing to the extent that you have this democratic deficit, right? But if you begin by taking seriously what does it mean to be in a polity, to participate genuinely in a polity, not just during elections, but in terms of defining the priorities that shift livelihood, that for me could be the starting point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, very rich intervention there. And here, in terms of priority, we're hearing livelihoods based very much on structural transformation. But also, I think what I heard there is the place of local institutions that have evolved to address, quite precise needs in those spaces. How can we learn from below as well? So how can the institutions that serve wider regional integration actually learn from those institutions that have evolved in those spaces to serve, successfully deliver on meeting certain needs? So coming away from this idea of informal spaces and informal institutions, I think troubling that logic and idea. Thank you very much for that. If I can come to you, Ms. Fatou, please. Yeah. Oh, sorry. My question was around. We've heard all of this now from your colleagues. What are the key priorities? What if there's 1-2 things that we say for this period going forward? We want in 50 years to see an ECOWAS that's delivering, or a regional framework, whatever it is, that is delivering on some of what you've set out today. What do we need to, from the long list, say absolutely these are the things in this moment we must target?
I think one of the major or the sources of our problems is also managing our diversity. When we look at around, I think all the issues of, self-perpetuating, nepotism. Some are linked to others, but I think there's a lot of importance of issues around ethnicity, religion. So how can we harness, celebrate, ensure that this diversity is not a hindrance, but something that could help us really to progress. And what I have in mind is to have really ECOWAS, as a driver, supporting countries, ensuring that, we build nation states that really are nation states that are anchored on, equal opportunity, non-discrimination. And at the heart, I think we talked about women. How can we really see, women as equal, ensuring that it's not an afterthought, a fashionable thing, paying lip service to the minorities, but ensuring that everybody has their place in the different countries, and that also at the regional level. Obviously, it's very challenging at this stage, but I believe this is something that could help us also to build a stronger institution at the national level, but also get more legitimacy at the regional level. For me, I think when I see around what is happening in all countries, maybe except few, and even some of the countries I thought do not have those issues, I realize they're quite present. Maybe they're a sophisticated way of dealing with them through excellence, through merit, but they're still hampering national cohesion and ultimately, sustainable development. So I would see that there are a few more, but of course we need to prioritize. So I think harnessing the diversity, being more inclusive, can help really ECOWAS countries to rise to the occasion.
Thank you very much for that really important intervention, especially if we're talking at the regional level, harnessing the diversities across the sub-region, but also I think what you set out there, ECOWAS or whatever regional framework, perhaps being the space that pushes for that, almost educating at the level of the nation state that this is important beyond lip service, and how this also speaks to or resonates with how resources are managed, how we think some of these questions about livelihoods. In fact, what does that mean if we read diversities as a space of richness, as a space of abundance as well, because ECOWAS is very well placed to be in a position to do that. Thank you so much for that. If I can come to you, Dr. Fatima, on the same question.
Okay, mine is very short. I'd just say that I'd like to see us have a lot more courage to be able to bridge the gaps between regional bodies and the people that they serve. I think the answers lie within that space in between.
Okay. Thank you very much for that courage. I think that's said rather beautifully. And I think if we look back to the establishment of ECOWAS, this is a term that would absolutely resonate. If we look to the spaces where, and we heard that several times today, where ECOWAS has been present, has been correct. We heard from an alumna from the Gambia, an alumna from Sierra Leone, speak about the significance of ECOWAS in particular moments. Think of the establishment of ECOWAS itself. It was a very, very bold move to suggest that we will organize ourselves as a single market to be able to negotiate our place in a very hierarchical global economy. So I think that's a beautiful space to end our own interaction on. If I can now turn to the audience to see if we have some questions. Thank you very much. I have one question. Let's take the question and we see if others come up as well. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, moderator. Thank you very much. Thank you also to the panelists. I would like to congratulate you for the clarity of this topic. You spoke very boldly. I would like to talk about this, more about this. My concern about this topic, I want to be sure that the organization in which we are in right now can function better. I think we need to begin from this. We need to change from a secretariat to a commission. This means that we go from a cooperation organization to one that which works more on integration. We need to be an organization which integrates people. And we can do this through amendments in the rules. We need to work on this and try to achieve this. In order to get to this stage, I believe that we need to give priority to principles which are enshrined in the Charter and in the other texts. So it will no longer work only on principles. We need to be able to accommodate all member states. The text which guides the functioning of this organization should be principles. In this way, we'll be able to effectively become an organization which is well integrated. To become an ECOWAS of the people, we need to be able to strengthen the power of the parliament. But before this, we need to ensure that the parliament is a parliament of the community through this election system, so that the parliament is one which is effective and will be able to meet the concerns of the people. We need to strengthen this by taking into concern the concerns of the non-state actors. We need to implement the advice of the communities regarding ECOWAS. It was something that was begun, but it wasn't completed. So we need to take into account all this, especially the non-state actors regarding reintegration, integration process. We have non-state actors, we have economic actors, we have civil society actors. We need to work with these people. I also think that we need to evaluate programs as well as policies which have been adopted. We need to evaluate this once more. I didn't say internal audit. We need to evaluate them. This goes beyond auditing them. This would enable us to be able to improve what we have on ground. So we need to systemize all this. In my opinion, I believe that every 2 or 3 years, major projects and programs need to be evaluated. And every 5 or 10 years, we evaluate the policy. So I have other ideas regarding this, but I'll stop here for this moment. Thank you very much.
Intervention there. Are there any additional questions? If not, I'll turn to the panel I think that was actually quite a robust set of comments. I see one more. Maybe we take that one. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, 1, 2. We'll take that group. Yeah, please.
Thanks. I think it's an interesting session talking about the issues of priorities. one thing that seems that this meeting is trying to focus that we realize that when we have too many priorities, it's not helpful. And it's better to have a few so that you look into it. And having listened, I just realized that the additional areas which I want to make some comments is in the area of economic transformation and value chain development. And under this, there's a need to shift the focus from the trade facilitation to production integration. For example, like industrialization, I do recall in the 70s and 80s, even in Nigeria, where we have the leylands, we have the other things. So there's a need to focus on that. That's why countries like Malaysia, Singapore are far. We need to go more into productive integration like industrialization, technology, and regional value chains. And then we've been doing good in agro-processing now. Then there is the issue of pharmaceutical now. We've been working with Cuba as well. There's a need. And then the digital services, and then the green manufacturing. That's one. Then the issue of regional connectivities as well. We've been talking about Abuja Lagos corridor line for years, but apparently we realized that the issue of there's a need, if we want all this industrialization process, there must be a regional infrastructure and connectivity, and we must prioritize that for a cross-border infrastructure and at the same time for integrated transport within the countries or member states. And finally, there must, just like Ambassador Mbaye said, having worked in ECOWAS 18 years, there's still need to work on the institutional reform and governance. There's a need to strengthen ECOWAS, especially its enforcement power. They tend to compare it with EU. EU takes a longer period. Despite the fact that we are a supranational organization, they don't have that policy. They don't have that instrument. They are like a toothless bulldog. At times, the member state, the strength of ECOWAS is what constitutes the member state. If the member states are not strong, ECOWAS cannot be strong. And if the member states break the rules and regulation, it means ECOWAS cannot function. So there's a need to deepen this collaboration as well. With Parliament, the Parliament we have right now is like, we all know it's been said, then the court is like a toothless. So there's a need to strengthen all the institutions as well. Then there's a need, the issue of AFTA as well, African Continental Free Trade. There needs to deepen the integration. Then people have mentioned about the human capital and inclusion. Education is different from what is being practiced in advanced countries. We lay emphasis on certificates here. When you all come from overseas, over there you have people with grade 4, 5, 6, and then they were able to practice it. So there's a need for digital skill and then innovation and promote the gender equality. And finally, integration itself cannot progress without peace. Whether we look at it, when you look at Vision 2050, that is the central theme there. You need to strengthen the ECOWAS early warning. Early warning is just there. There are occasions where the signals are there, but the Commission does not have the power. I don't want to go into the epistemology. If the country tells you, not come, I knew how it took us when we went to Gambia. It has to be strict there. And then the democratic governance mechanism need to be addressed. I think just a short, those are some of the things.
Thank you very much. I think Prof just said something about the integration of mechanism that accommodates all interest group. I've looked at the history of ECOWAS since its establishment in 1975, and I realized that at the time it was formed, we had less than 15 million people living with disabilities in the West African region, as against the growing 450 million as posited by a scholar. Today we have over 60 million. And so there's a need for us to now begin to look at how we can begin to mainstream the voices of people with disabilities into these debates, into this debate of integration. It's also going to help us to also check against, this, so-called crisis that has led to balkanization and distrust among the African region, because prior to this time when it was established, founding fathers had the trade liberalization, they had the need for unity of Africa, they had the issue of growth and what have you. But now we're looking at self dreams, country self aspirations and what have you than the collective interest. So if we're able to bring the voices of people with disability into the council it will also help us to begin to build the world to know that we can't have Africa or West Africa with people that are known to have the largest. Today we have more than 20 million, 20% of the world population living with disability in West Africa because of conflict, because of poor betting, because of disaster, because of increasing war and what have you. So we want to say that is a new voice that we must incorporate in the new documents. Thank you.
Again, really, really vital points. I think we had a rich set of comments there from the floor. So I'll return to the panelists now. We heard that there are a lot of points there, so I'll invite you to perhaps take one or two that are burning for you to respond to, because I see that we are at 4:30, and we will be chased away from here very shortly. So if I can invite you to just take, one or two that you would really like to respond to, that'll be great. Any takers to begin? No, I'll come to, yeah? Okay.
I think it has been said again. It's to address the democratic crisis that we are in by ensuring that we strengthen governance. The leadership is in disarray. How do we rebuild new, committed, and resolve-driven leaders to accompany this new vision that we have? I think we need to promote new leadership in the region. I think also we need to look into investing in ensuring that citizen voices are stronger, so that everything will not fall going forward on the leaders' goodwill or lack of it. So really, we need to build citizen voices stronger than what we have currently. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. No comments there? Okay, thank you. I'll come to you, Faisal, if that's okay. If there is a
Hello. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the point about people with disability is really important. And it seems to me if we're talking about fundamental social change, it's about prioritizing the most marginalized in society. So if we take seriously the question of people with disability, women who are often on the margins but carry the most social burden. So really, if we say the template would be governed by the priorities of those who are the most marginalized. And for me, that should just be the rallying cry. Thank you.
Thank you very much to my very distinguished panelists here for a very, very rich offering and a very rich exchange as well. I've learned a great deal. I also want to extend my thanks to Excellencies, the distinguished guests in the audience here with us. Those very rich comments and exchanges, we've really appreciated those. I think we've generated quite a lot of material that should continue to help and support on this journey. Thank you very much to our hosts as well, who have carried us on through till today. And, from me, it's just to thank you so much. It's really been a privilege to be here, to thank my panelists, really, really excellent contributions. To thank you and to hand over back to you as well. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Nous vous remercions chaleureusement, chères modératrices et panélistes, de nous avoir gratifiés de cette panel très intéressant sur l'avenir de l'intégration économique régionale et du développement économique durable.
I'd like to urge you to clap for them anew. Now, I'd like to ask you to come forward so that we can take the pictures. Photographers, please assist us.
please.
It's okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are inching to the end of this first day, which is full of reflections and discussions. We have explored the foundation and the challenges of regional integration through the African Public Square debate. This afternoon, we had deepened future reflections and the economic dimensions of this integration. Let me warmly thank all our panelists, moderators, and even you, the public, for the quality of your interventions and commitments. I'd like to inform you that we have a dinner tonight at 7:30. We would see you at that dinner for us to have ECOWAS of the peoples. We will have the honor of having Dr. Ibn Chambers, who will be representing the African Union on how to silence the guns, and Professor Abdoulaye Bachili, who is the special envoy of Senegal on international affairs. That will be an important opportunity to have informal discussions and networking. We hope to see you there. Buses will be positioned outside to take you back to your hotels. So see you this evening, and rest well.